Hey guys, so it's finally here, the Rekon 4 FR, my Sub250 Freestyle platform. Now, I know many of you have been waiting for this for quite a while, and it took seemingly forever for this to get in production, so thanks for everybody for their patience. And basically, I mean, maybe let's take a step back and reiterate what this is actually about, because I think not everybody will have seen the previous videos. So let's dive right into what this concept here is about and what my objective was with this design. Now, most of you will know that basically I come from designing these 4-inch very light long-range platforms like the Flywheel Explorer, the original micro long-range, or the Rekon 4 here. And clearly you can notice some similarities between both of them. They are somewhat based on the same design baseline. But there are a few very big differences, and the biggest difference I would say is that the design objective of the overall setup is completely different. This here is meant to be very efficient, fly for a very long time with a very good range, and not necessarily to be, particularly powerful or have a particularly nice handling for freestyle or racing. While this here is basically the complete opposite, and while still it does look somewhat similar, it does have a completely different objective. The objective here is maximum flight performance, but while being sub 250, and with maximum flight performance, I basically mean this should be the best freestyle platform I can come up with while being sub 250 for really flying freestyle and feeling like you're flying an actual 5-inch 6S setup. All the while, having still something quiet, light, sub 250, which is advantages for regulation. So that was the objective here. And let's see how exactly the whole thing is set up to achieve this objective of having this sort of 5-inch freestyle quad feeling in a sub 250 form. So the thing that stayed the same relative to the long range versions is the main body. Basically, we still have this, classic sort of split deck design, split because the bottom plate here is split to have more room up in the front for the camera. So the main body is basically still the same for a few reasons. First, I really wanted this to look like a, classic freestyle quad. And so this was perfect, not like a big toothpick or something. This also has plenty of room for components. As you can see, this is almost pretty empty. So you can fit whatever you want in here, basically 20x20 stacks all in one, 16x16 stacks, 20x20 stacked VTXs, rather big VTXs even. I have the big 2-watt Rush VTX here in the rear of my prototype. So plenty of room for whatever you want to do. So this is why I kept the main body. Now, the arms are obviously updated. Let me zoom out a little bit. Now, the arms are a wide X. As you can see, this is slightly wider than tall. Wide X, they are wider. So this is now 7x4 millimeters. And also, the base of the arms is quite beefed up here. So this whole section here is quite beefy on this one compared to the long range version. So far so good. So that means actually no huge changes to the sort of baseline frame, except making it more robust overall and making it a wide X. The thing I put the most focus on basically is the motors and the overall drivetrain concept and props. So let's dive a little bit into that and talk about how they perform. So how I approached the motor selection was actually quite simple. I built these two prototypes here and then bought pretty much any motor I can find on the market that could maybe work in all sorts of different sizes and KVs, and then always put different ones on these two quads that I can sort of compare them side by side. And obviously the motor selection was always a compromise between, let's say, the flight characteristics I was looking for and weight and efficiency. And what I ended up with in terms of stator size is an 1804. So this is still the X Nova I tested with, the 1804. It's a nice intermediate size. And in my opinion, I mean, it's not the biggest motor you would probably use on 4-inch, but I found that between an 1804 and, for example, a 2004, it wasn't really much of an improvement or any improvement in terms of how the motor can spin the prop and how the quad feels in the air. It was basically just adding weight. So for me, 1804 really felt like the sweet spot where there's not too much weight on the quad, and but it still got enough torque. And the next thing I had to figure out are the KV. And here again, I mean, you can see these have basically the same motor in different KVs because I tried different configurations here. And what I ended up with is go for really the more aggressive option, which was 3500 kV, because I really wanted to have that extra punch. I mean, all right, so this is the production version motor, 1804 3500 kV. So in size and kV, it's the same as the X Novas I tested, but I mean, obviously, while I don't know how exactly the X Novas are configured in terms of, air gaps, magnets, and so on, this one here is really also not, I mean, it's not super aggressive, but it's more powerful than the X Nova. So you're going to notice an increase in punch between these two, even though they are in principle the same specification. This one is, the punch on this Rekon 1804 here is really quite impressive. Especially with these props here. And by the way, let's talk a bit about the prop choice here. So it will be delivered with the tri-blade jam fans here. I mean, I also tested a bunch of different props here. For example, the folding props here, the bi-blade version of this, and the HQ props. I found the HQ to be not aggressive enough to get the punch I wanted. It's nice when you're flying more in proximity, but I really preferred the more aggressive jam fan prop. And the tri-blade version here. The bi-blade version is even faster and punchier, but I found it to feel a little bit, not having enough grip, being a bit out of control. So the tri-blade version here is a really nice compromise for freestyle between acceleration, punch, and still having grip and being in control with a quad that feels locked and, like this feeling of flying like on rails, basically. So that's the props this is going to be delivered with. Now the electronics, so apart from the motors, obviously, here, I mean, quite simple. This is more geared towards saving some weight compared to the long-range version. So all-in-one flight controller because it's lighter and a slightly smaller VTX. So this is not the 20x20, full 20x20 mounted VTX that is in the analog version of the Rekon 4. It's the 350 milliwatt smaller VTX to save a little bit of weight. By the way, this is not the antenna it's going to come with. I ripped mine off during testings. That's why I have a Foxeer antenna on there. But basically, electronic setup as light as possible. The Caddx Rotel 2 here, I mean, here we could be lighter with a nano cam, but I really don't like compromising too much on the image quality, so it's got the decent Caddx Rotel 2. But apart from that, pretty simple electronics here. Not too much to see. The buzzer is removed, the GPS is removed, basically everything is removed that isn't required for freestyle here, just to save some weight. And obviously this will also come in a Caddx Vista version. I'm not sure with camera, I think maybe still with the Nebula Pro, which isn't as, with the Nebula Nano, which isn't as good as the Pro. But unfortunately, it's really difficult at the moment to get a hold on Vista units. Before we talk about flight performance, I forgot an important thing, and that is to talk about weight. So, analog version here, 144 grams. Let's add a better strap because we want to be complete here. 148. The digital version is 14 grams heavier, so 162. And as you can see here, especially on this analog version, if I add a 750 4S, 235 grams, so we still are way below 250, so absolutely no problem here. And you could even quite easily weight optimize this, especially if you're building your own, weight optimize this to be light enough to actually carry a naked GoPro that is around 25 grams, a naked GoPro while being sub 250. So the things you can do is use a nano camera instead of a micro camera here. You can replace the Immortal T by a smaller micro Immortal T here. I forgot how they're called. This actually saves a bunch of weight. There's things like the GPS mounts here on screws. You could just simplify it, saves a bunch of weight too, and it's still got 4 motor screws. So it's actually quite light to get this, even light enough to carry a naked GoPro while being sub 250. At least the analog version. Or the digital version, it's it's barely possible because this Vista unit and the cameras are just quite heavy overall. Just one thing to be aware of that I just realized on the production version here, if you're using an 850R line, it's unfortunately it's hard to predict these things, but the production version seems to be a tiny bit over 250 with an 850R line, so 1.6 gram over it. I mean, also these are easy to find. Just remove a few motor screws if you have to. You maybe the Immortal T actually saves something like 6 grams. If you change it, remove a zip tie or something, quite easy to find this gram here, or even a lighter battery strap. This one's pretty heavy, but be aware that you might have to do a bit of optimization if you run a battery like this one that is quite heavy for an 850, that is over 100 grams. I would say a battery up to 100 grams will not be any problem on the analog version, and then correspondingly 85 grams on the digital version. But be aware that this is sort of the limit you can work with. 750 is actually more comfortable. This one's much lighter, 86 grams. So this one should probably also work on the digital version. Now let's talk about flight performance.
So there were a few things I wanted to achieve in terms of flight characteristics, and this is always a bit difficult to describe and showcase in videos, but I'll give it a try. So first, I wanted it to have a bit of momentum, so you can basically throw it around. You know, it doesn't feel like it's completely floating in the air. It does have a certain weight feel that you're used to from bigger quads. You will notice if you fly it that there's one thing I couldn't get out completely, that there's a slight floatiness when it falls. So it seems to fall a bit slow. That's the only downside of having 4-inch props instead of maybe 3 or 3.5-inch props. But there are other downsides to 3.5-inch props, specifically that there aren't very many 3.5-inch props on the market. I think only 2 at the moment. 3.5 is a bit closer in disk load to what a regular 5-inch would be compared to 4-inch, but you do sacrifice a lot of flight time, and then mostly it means that you have a very limited prop choice. So I think 4-inch is still the best choice for sub 250 here, because you also avoid a big disadvantage of sub 250 5-inch, which in my testing was that I actually had to use a pretty small battery on a sub 250 5-inch when I wanted it to be sub 250, and it was usually still a very close call. And then I had the problem that I did have very powerful punch outs, but my battery was just sagging like crazy. It was just the balance between how much amps the motors pull and how much power they have and how big the battery is and how much amps it can deliver was just off. On this 4-inch in comparison, it is very powerful. It's got a pretty good punch, but still you don't feel like you're immediately overstressing the battery and getting low battery warnings right away. So you can really use these punch outs. You can do longer punch outs. It's not a problem. As you can see on the DVR here, there's no low battery warnings popping up when I'm doing a punch out, even if the battery is at something like 2.7 volts. No problem at all here. So it feels really sort of balanced and consistent overall, and the flight characteristics are really quite nice. It's super snappy, it's super agile, it's got a very decent top speed for such a small quad. It's not very quiet, but still the noise level is actually quite lower than on a regular 5-inch, so noticeably quieter. It screams a bit when you really punch it, but overall you can still hear and see that it's a rather small quad. It's not drawing too much attention. Yeah, and that's basically the result of all this development. And I think for me personally, this is really the perfect Sub250 freestyle platform. I know that 3.5 inch is also a candidate, but again, in my opinion, it's not ready yet. There's a very limited prop choice. There weren't any props that I actually really liked, and I think this 4-inch here, which also carries another advantage, carries a naked GoPro better because it's just got more prop area, more disc area, and more thrust, so you can load it a bit more, and it's less of a problem. And you could even carry a bigger battery like lithium ion if you want to. Alright guys, then thanks for watching, and bye bye.